Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet the mini cozy cardigan. So this pattern is a child size version of my comfy cozy cardigan pattern, and it is pretty simple to work, relatively beginner friendly if you're comfortable with some of the basics. And before we get started, you'll need the free version of the written pattern, which you can view by clicking the first link in the description box down below, or you can purchase the ad-free printable PDF version of the pattern at the second link in the description box below. So this pattern comes in 8 different sizes, from a child size 2 to a child size 16. And ideally, you'll want to measure the child if possible to determine which size they're going to need. So once you have decided on which size you're going to make, then you can get your supplies ready. So I have my yarn here, and this is Yarn Bee Soft and Sleek. It says it's a low pill yarn, and this is an acrylic yarn, but it is very soft and smooth and not scratchy like some acrylics would be. And it doesn't necessarily matter if you use this particular yarn, but you will need to make sure that your yarn is number 4 worsted weight. Do not try to substitute a bulky yarn or a DK yarn or any other thickness of yarn. It has to be number 4. So if you turn your yarn label over, now this one has it on there very, very small, but right there on the yarn label where it says 4 medium, that's what you're looking for. It should not say 5 bulky, it should not say 3 DK or any other number. It should say 4 medium, because that is essentially the category of thickness that you have to have for this pattern. So I'm using this particular yarn. I really like the look and feel of it, but you can substitute a different brand, a different line of yarn, as long as it is number 4 medium or worsted weight. So I have several skeins of this here, and how much yarn you need will depend on which size you're making, but all of that information is included in the pattern. And then you'll need some other supplies. So here I have my crochet hook that I'm going to be using for this. This is a US size I, or 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. This one is the Furls Odyssey Purple. Love this hook. But of course you can use a different brand of hook if you want to. And please keep in mind that the hook size listed in the pattern, which is this I 5.5 millimeter, is a suggestion only. Always use the hook size that gets you the correct gauge for the pattern, because in reality, everybody's tension is a little different, and your stitches may not come out the same size as mine if you're using the same size hook. So check your gauge, please. That is extremely important, especially for garment making. Check your gauge. I have a video on gauge if you're not familiar with that. I will link that down below. And then choose the hook size that gets you the correct gauge for the pattern. So I also have here some scissors, a measuring tape, and some yarn needles or tapestry needles. And then you'll also need a couple of these. These are locking stitch markers. And you can use a split ring stitch marker if you rather. Or a safety pin will work just fine if you don't have any of these. But these are very handy, and we're going to be using these to help us sew our cardigan together. So now that we have all of our supplies gathered, we can get started with the crochet. Alright, so now let's get started with the body of the sweater. And the body of this cardigan is made in one piece, so that the back piece of the cardigan and both front pieces are all one piece. And we're going to be working this sideways. So instead of starting at the bottom and working rows back and forth, up the back or up the front, we're starting on the side edge from the back hem all the way up and over the front, and then we're working our rows this way. So we're going to be constructing this a little bit differently, but that is to help avoid some of the extra seams that you would normally find in a cardigan if you worked the rows going back and forth this direction. So we're going to go ahead and start working our vertical rows, but we're going to start with something called a Foundation Half-Double Crochet. So a Foundation Half-Double Crochet is a way of working both the foundation chain and the first row of half-double crochet at the same time. And what this does is it makes that foundation edge a lot stretchier and helps it hang evenly with the edge on the other side, which will not have a foundation edge on it. So if you'd rather not use the Foundation Half-Double Crochet, the pattern does include instructions for how many chains to work for each size and how many half-double crochet stitches to work as well. But I highly recommend the Foundation Half-Double Crochet if you're willing to give it a shot. And I do have a video that goes into this stitch in more detail, which I will link down below in the description box. So I'm going to leave a reasonable tail. And I'm going to start by chaining 2. So this is the beginning of our Foundation Half-Double Crochet row. And for the first Foundation Half-Double Crochet stitch, I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook into the second chain from the hook. I'm going to yarn over, pull up 1 loop. So right now it just looks like a regular half-double crochet, but we're going to add in 1 extra step to add the chain to the base of it. So we're going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop to add the chain at the bottom of the stitch. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook to make the half-double crochet. So if I just tug on my tail right there, you can kind of see how we've created both the foundation chain and the stitch that goes into it at the same time. So I should mention here as well that I'm going to be making the size 6 for my sample cardigan. And so according to the pattern for the size 6, I need to work 99 more Foundation Half-Double Crochet stitches after this first one. So I'm going for a total of 100 Foundation Half-Double Crochet in my row. And that does not include the chain 2 at the beginning. So for all the following stitches, I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to insert my hook into the base of the previous stitch. So you can see right here where it looks like there's a chain underneath this half-double crochet. I'm going to insert my hook into that. So I like to turn it upside down so you can see the foundation edge. And then I'm going to insert my hook into both strands of the base of the previous stitch because it kind of looks like the top of a regular stitch. It's just upside down. So now I'm going to yarn over, pull up 1 loop. Then I'm going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop for the chain, and yarn over, pull through 3 loops for the half-double crochet. So again, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into both strands of the base of the previous stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1 loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook. So once we kind of get this started here, and like I said, if you want more detail on that, I have another video that explains that in more detail. But once we start to get our foundation half-double crochet edge going, you'll be able to see how stretchy this really is compared to a regular foundation chain. This edge has pretty much the same amount of stretch in it as a regular row of stitches, which really helps make the fabric more neat and consistent because a lot of times foundation chains can be a little tight and they limit the stretch of the edge. So I'm going to continue working my row of foundation half-double crochet until I have worked a total of 100 foundation half-double crochet stitches for the size that I'm making. Alright, so here is my row of foundation half-double crochet. You can see how stretchy that is. And now we're ready to move on to row 2. So for row 2, we're going to chain 2 and turn the work. And by the way, this chain 2 at the beginning of each row does not count as a stitch. So what we're going to do now is, for this row, we're going to start working our ribbing. Now, for the ribbing, we're working a slight variation on a regular half-double crochet, and I usually call it the ribbing half-double crochet or ribbed half-double crochet, but it's also been called half-double crochet in the 3rd loop. And I do have another video on this stitch in more detail if you're interested in checking that out. I will link it down below. But what we're going to be doing is, instead of working our half-double crochet in the top of the stitch like this, like we normally would, we're going to ignore both of those loops, and we're going to come down here to this diagonal strand on the front, or what is facing us as the front of the stitch, and we're going to work our half-double crochet there. So like I said, I've chained 2 and I've turned the work. We're not counting the chain 2 as the stitch. So we're going to work a ribbing half-double crochet in the same stitch, which is actually down here, because instead of working in the top, like I said, we're going to be working in this diagonal strand across the front. So I'm going to half-double crochet in that strand. That's my first one. And now I'm going to work a ribbing half-double crochet in the next 6 stitches for the size that I'm making. So again, instead of inserting my hook into the top, I'm going to come down here and insert it into this diagonal strand on the front of the stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's a total of 7 ribbing half double crochet stitches because we already did 1 in the same stitch that the chain was coming from, and then we did 6 more. So you can kind of see how that creates that ribbed look because both strands of the top of the stitch are pushed forward to the surface and create that ribbing type of look on the fabric. So next we're going to be working regular half double crochet stitches almost to the end of the row. So for the size 6, I'm going to work a regular half double crochet in each of the next 86 stitches. And now we're going to work a ribbing half double crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. So again, instead of working into the top, we're going to work our half double crochet in this diagonal strand across the front. Alright, so that's the end of row 2, and keep in mind that for each size, the numbers of half double crochet stitches and the numbers of ribbing half double crochet stitches are going to be different. So please check the written instructions to know how many stitches to work of each type for whatever size you're making. And you'll see here that my row has curled up quite a bit. But this is totally normal. This is just, what happens with crochet sometimes when you work the first couple of rows. But as you continue to work and add more rows to the piece, it will flatten out on its own. So, now we're going to be repeating row 2. So for the size 6, I'm going to repeat row 2 8 more times, and then we'll come back and work row 3. Alright, so I've finished repeating row 2, the correct number of times for the size that I'm making. So now it's time to move on to row 3. But before we do that, I just want to show you what the piece we have so far actually is. You might think that the fronts of the cardigan are going to go like this, where they fold in from the side, but that's actually not what we're doing here. The ends with the ribbing are the bottom of the front and the back. So, for example, if I lay this down flat, here's the back, and then here's the other end. It's going to fold over the top to make the front on one side. And then next we're going to, with the next section of rows, we're going to work only partial rows so that we make another section across the back in between where the two fronts come over to make the fronts of the cardigan. So this is kind of the center back section. And we're going to do this by working row 3 first. So for row 3, I've already turned the work. I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to work a ribbed half double crochet in the same stitch and in the next 6 stitches after that. And now for the size 6, I'm going to half double crochet in the next 36 stitches. Alright, and there we are going to stop. We are not going to continue working across the rest of this row. We're going to stop. And this right here where we have stopped is going to be the length of the next section of rows. So we're going to be working across only the back of the cardigan and not working across the whole piece, which would include the front here. So that is the end of row 3. Now we're going to turn and work row 4. So for row 4, I'm going to chain 2 and turn. I'm going to half double crochet in the same stitch and in the next 35 stitches. And now I'm going to go ahead and ribbed half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. And that is the end of row 4. So next is row 5. We're going to chain 2 and turn the work. And I'm going to ribbed half double crochet in the same stitch and in the next 6 stitches following. And of course, again, these numbers only apply to the size 6. If you're making a different size, then check the pattern for the numbers that pertain to your size. And once I've finished those ribbed half double crochets, I am again going to half double crochet in the next 36 stitches. And there we go, that's the end of row 5. So if we fold this in half, you can kind of see how that this is the front of the cardigan on one side, And then this right here, where we've just started working, is a section that is only worked across the back to make the back wider before we add another front piece. So for the size that I'm making, I am now going to repeat rows 4 and 5 6 more times. And then once I have repeated rows 4 and 5 6 more times, I'm going to work row 4, just row 4, one more time after that. And then I will show you what that looks like, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so I have finished repeating rows 4 and 5 the correct number of times for the size that I'm making, and I have repeated row 4 one more time, so now my hook is at the bottom edge of the piece. So you can kind of see how this is going here. Here's a front, here's the center part of the back, and then we're going to make the next front, the other front side, in just a minute. And it might seem like there is a pretty wide gap here between the front on the one side and what's going to be the front on the other side. But when we go ahead and work the neck edging, that will add some width to both fronts to help close the gap a little bit more. So I've already turned the work and we're ready to work row 6. So for row 6, we're going to be working across here, and then we're going to work that foundation half double crochet to add more length to the row again so that it's the same length as this section was. So I've turned the work. I'm going to chain 2. And now I'm going to work a ribbing half double crochet in the same stitch and in the next 6 stitches. And now I'm going to half double crochet in the next 36 stitches, which will bring me to the end of the previous row. And then we will go ahead and add some more length to that. Alright, there's that last stitch. And now we're going to begin working some more foundation half double crochet. So to do that, I am going to work one foundation half double crochet into the base of the stitch that I just worked. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the same stitch I just worked into, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one loop to make the chain, and yarn over, pull through 3 loops to make the half double crochet. So now that I have that first one there, I'm going to work 56 more foundation half double crochet for the size that I'm making. And that will finish out the length that we need for this row so that we can make it the same length as the front on the other side of the cardigan. Alright, so that is the end of row 6 now that I have added this extra length to my row. And now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat row 2. So for the size 6, I'm going to repeat row 2 9 more times. And then the body of our cardigan will be finished, and I will show you what that looks like before we move on to the sleeves. Alright, so I have finished repeating the rows that we need to finish this section of the cardigan body. So now we're ready to tie off, and you can kind of see the shape of the piece that we've made here, where that we started out with a lot more stitches, then we worked only partial rows across the back, and then we worked more longer rows on the other side here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn, leaving a reasonable tail, and then we're going to go ahead and tie off. Now, if you want to kind of see how the cardigan is going to be put together, we can take these 2 front flaps, fold them down to meet the other ends of the rows. I do have a couple little yarn tails sticking out here that I've woven in but did not trim. So now we got those out of the way, and then here is our cardigan body. Now the front panels of the cardigan at this point do look a little bit narrow, but that's because we're going to come along later and add in the neck edging. So we're going to work all around the neck and make a section that adds width to this, but also makes enough of a collar to fold back a little bit. So we are now done with the body of the cardigan, and now we're ready to move on to the sleeves. So before we begin the sleeve, we're going to leave a long yarn tail for seaming. So I'm going to mark this little spot right here in my hand as where we're going to start, and then I'm going to wind up the rest of this yarn tail just to get it out of the way. So I just kind of like to roll it up, and then I'll go around it a couple times across the middle and loop the yarn around it to secure so it won't come unrolled. Then we've got our spot right here where we're going to begin the Foundation Half-Double Crochet row for the sleeve. So the sleeves are worked sideways as well, and we're again going to start with the Foundation Half-Double Crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 2. I'm going to work a Foundation Half-Double Crochet in the second chain from my hook. And tug on my little yarn tail to pull it tight. And for the size that I'm making, which is the size 6, I need to work 48 more Foundation Half-Double Crochet to get the whole length for my sleeve, because again we are working this sideways. So this piece of the sleeve is not started at the bottom or at the top, it's started along one side edge, and we're going to be working our rows sideways. Alright, so I've finished working my entire row of Foundation Half-Double Crochet, and now we're ready to move on to row 2. So for row 2, I'm going to chain 2 and turn. I'm going to work a Ribbed Half-Double Crochet in the same stitch and in the next 4 stitches. And now I'm going to half-double crochet in the next 22. Alright, so that was 22 half-double crochet, and again all these numbers are for the size that I'm making, so check the pattern. And now I'm going to double crochet in the next 22. And so by adding double crochet in part of each of these rows, but only near one end of the rows, we're going to be making our sleeve panel wider at one side than at the other. And this is what's going to taper the sleeve so that it's narrower towards the wrist than it is at the top, but without working any kind of increases or other kind of shaping. We're just going to switch to double crochet at one end of each of these rows. And that will, since double crochet is taller, that will add width to the top of our sleeve. Alright, there's my last double crochet. That's the end of my row. So now we're ready to turn and work row 3. So for row 3, we're going to chain 3 and turn. Then we're going to double crochet in the same stitch that the chain is coming from and double crochet in the next 28 stitches. Alright, so that is the end of where we're going to stop working double crochet and then switch back to half double crochet. So now I'm going to half double crochet in the next 15 stitches. Alright, so now we just have 5 stitches left in the row, and we're going to ribbed half double crochet in the next 5 stitches. Alright, so that's the end of row 3. So for most of our sleeve piece, we're going to be repeating rows 2 and 3 till we have the width that we need. So for the size that I'm making, which is the size 6, I'm going to repeat rows 2 and 3 7 more times. So if you notice here, at this end of our piece so far, we have the ribbing, and this end is a little bit shorter than this one. This end where we have all the double crochet instead of half double crochet is just slightly taller. And so what that's going to do is, as we continue repeating those 2 rows, the double crochet at this end is going to make this side taller than this side. So when we put this into our cardigan, which it will be like this and sideways, then this part up here will be the top of the sleeve, which will be a little bit wider than this part down here, which is the cuff of the sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead and continue repeating rows 2 to 3, the correct number of times for the size that I'm making, and then we'll move on to row 4 to finish it off. Alright, so here is what our sleeve looks like at this point, and now we've worked these rows 2 and 3 until we have repeated them enough times for whatever size you're making. So now we're going to work row 4 to finish it off. I'm going to chain 2 and turn. I'm going to work a half double crochet in the same stitch. And then I'm going to half double crochet in the next 43 stitches for this size. Alright, and now I'm going to ribbed half double crochet in the next 5 stitches. Alright, and that is the end of the last row of our sleeve, and you can see how that the way we've worked those rows makes the one side of our piece taller than the other, so that when we turn this in this direction, the top of the sleeve will be wider than the cuff. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a tail and cut my yarn. and now we can tie off. Alright, so now I have made 2 sleeves exactly the same way, and here's the body of my cardigan. So the next step before we do any of the assembly is we need to block our pieces. Now if you're not familiar with blocking, I do have a video on that. I will put the link below the video. And blocking is just a way of relaxing the fabric and smoothing it out and making it look its very best. So since I'm using an acrylic yarn for this, I'm going to steam block my panels. Now if you're using a natural fiber yarn, feel free to wet block or spray block if you rather, but I'm going to steam block. And I should also mention here that if you are using a machine washable yarn, then you could, if you wanted to, instead of blocking, throw the pieces in the washing machine, and if the label says you can put them in the dryer, you can also put them in the dryer. And that will accomplish basically the same thing as blocking if you don't want to have to steam your acrylic pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and block my panels, and then we'll move on to the assembly. Alright, so all of my pieces are blocked, and now we're ready to move on to sewing the sleeves and the body together. So if we look at the body of our cardigan, you can see here that I have the 2 fronts of the piece folded down so that all the ribbed edges are at the bottom. This is how the cardigan is going to be when it's finished. So what we're going to do is we are going to be sewing the sleeve on either side up here, and then we're going to sew the side seams as well. So the first thing we need to do is we need to kind of count the stitches on the edge, because if you remember, our rows went this way when we made our panels. So there are stitches across this edge that are the top of the last row. And then on this edge, we have the foundation half-double crochet row, which looks like a row of regular stitches even on the foundation edge. So this is really easy to stitch into and to work into if you need to, crochet something into this edge later, which of course we don't. But that is what the foundation half-double crochet is ideal for. So instead of sewing side seams first, we're going to add the sleeves first and then sew the side seams and the sleeve seam. So what we need to do is divide the stitches. For example, I'm going to use this last row right here. We're going to divide these stitches in half. Now, if you want to just fold it in half real evenly and kind of mark that spot, you can, but I recommend counting them. So I know that when I made this piece right here, that the full stitch count for the entire row was 100 stitches. So I need to count in 50 stitches and place a marker between the 50th stitch and the 51st stitch to mark the center point. Alright, so here's the 50th stitch. I'm going to put my stitch marker. This is a locking stitch marker. And these come in tons of different colors. They are very readily available. But if you don't have one of these, you can use a safety pin. I'm going to put this marker in between the top of the 50th stitch and the top of the 51st stitch. And I'm just going to clip it closed so it doesn't fall out. So now we're going to do essentially the same thing with our sleeve. So I'm going to take one of these sleeve pieces. I'm actually going to unroll the long yarn tail that we left on here because we're going to use this tail for the seaming. And so we want that unwound. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this sleeve piece. You can see how that at one end we have the cuff, which is the ribbing, and then at the taller end, which is the top of the sleeve, this is the edge we're going to be sewing to the sweater. So we're going to take the 2 long edges and fold them together like so. And what we're going to do is when we kind of line these up real neatly, we're going to come up here to this top edge, and we're going to make sure our corners are lined up, and then we're going to find the exact halfway point of this sleeve panel and put a marker in there. So now we have our sleeve marked at half the width, and we have the body of our sweater marked at half as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open this up, and we're going to line up these 2 stitch markers. So I like to line them up very carefully, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the one that's on the cardigan side, and I'm going to poke it through basically the exact same spot where this marker is. So I might need to actually open this marker and kind of get it out of the way, but I'm going to poke the stitch marker from the body of the cardigan into that center point, and hold those two together. So this is going to help us line up our sleeve so that it is halfway between the back hem edge and the front hem edge. So now once we have this lined up at the center, we're just going to kind of put the edges up against each other here and put another stitch marker right there to hold those two edges together. So now we have this prepared for the first half of our seam. So I'm going to take this long yarn tail that is at the corner of the top of my sleeve, and I'm going to thread it into my yarn needle. So now we're going to be whip stitching these two edges together from here to here. So what I like to do is I like to count how many stitches from the body edge of the cardigan panel right here. I like to count how many of the stitches that I stitch through when I'm whip stitching these two edges together, so then I know exactly how many stitches that I will need to count out for the other half of the sleeve seam up here, the shoulder seam, I guess. So I'm going to take this yarn needle and I'm just going to take a stitch exactly where the marker is. Now, if you're making one of the larger sizes, you could place this marker further up, like so, kind of at the halfway point in between the center and the beginning right here. But I'm going to count, so I went into one stitch from the body here. Here's the second one. Here's 3. And I highly recommend that you do this out on a flat surface and not on your lap, because it will be easier to get it to lay nice and smooth if you are laying it out on a table or something in front of you. So that was 3 stitches from the body. Now I'm going to come over here and you can kind of lift up the edge of this if you need to see where where the needle should go each time. There's 4. So each time I'm coming across, starting my needle on this side, and then coming up through one of the stitches from the body panel. And so I'm going to continue stitching across in this manner, counting how many stitches I am working into from the body panel until I get to the center marker. Alright, so I've made it up to the marker and I worked through 17 stitches from the body of the sweater. So now I can kind of move it over a little further, take out the center marker, and I can count 17 stitches on the body of the sweater edge right here. There's that 17th stitch. So I'm going to take my marker and use it to kind of pin the very corner of the sleeve through that 17th stitch. So that way we know that our sleeve is lined up just right, so that when we go to stitch the side seam, you won't have more stitches on the front than on the back. So we're going to just pin that together right there. If you want, you can go ahead and take the other marker and pin it together in the kind of halfway point in between where you're at and where the marker is. That's fine too. So now I'm just going to continue whip stitching these two edges until I get all the way to this marker with that 17th stitch on this half of the seam. Alright, so we're down to that last stitch. I'm just going to take the marker out to work that very last stitch. There we go, and that is the end of our sleeve seam. So I'm going to take one more stitch right through where I just was, wrap the yarn around the needle, and pull the needle through to make a knot, and that will secure the end of our seam. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side to add the other sleeve. And then once I do that, we will fold this whole thing in half, like so, to add the side seam right here. Alright, so I've added the sleeve panel to the other side, just like we did here. And now we're going to be stitching this seam right here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start down here at the cuff, and I'm going to grab the yarn tail from when we tied off. And I'm going to thread that through my yarn needle. And now, because we have the same number of stitches on each of these edges, we can just do one stitch through each side here. So I can pick up a stitch from this side and the same stitch on the other side, and that will help make sure that our piece is evenly sewn together. So then our seam won't have any bubbles or puckers or anything like that in it. So I'm just going to again whip stitch these two edges together until I get to the corner here at the underarm. Alright, so you can see I am down to the corner here where these two seams intersect. So I'm going to take one stitch right through the corner. I'm going to take that same stitch again, wrap the yarn around my needle, and pull the needle through to make a knot. Now, I'm going to weave in this tail later, but for now I just want to show you real quick how we're going to finish this side seam. So we've stitched from the cuff to the underarm. Now we're out of tail, and that's why we left our long tail from the sleeve seam attached. We didn't cut it short. So now we can take this longer tail from the sleeve seam and stitch these two edges together the rest of the way down. So I'm just going to tuck this yarn tail inside so that I can weave it in later. And now I'm going to go ahead and whip stitch, starting at that corner. I'm going to whip stitch these two side edges together till I get all the way to the bottom hem. Alright, so I'm almost down to the edge, and I just wanted to point out here that if you want to, you can, I'm going to take out my last stitch right there, you can kind of stitch the ribbed edges together in a little bit different way so that the ribbing is not interrupted. So I'm going to rethread my yarn right there, and if we decide which edge is going to be the ribbing, because you can see here that the edge right here is where another ribbing column should be, where the tops of those stitches should fold out to the outside so you can see them. So instead of whip stitching this together all the way to the edge, which you can do if you'd rather, I'm going to come down through this edge like so. And I'm going to bring, since I've already brought it through the stitch on this side, I'm going to bring it over this side and then come through the stitch I just did and then back this way through the next one. Then I can come over here, grab the next stitch on this edge, then enter my needle right through that stitch and back through the stitch after it. And what we're doing is we're not going over the stitches on this side. We're only going over when we work through the stitches on this side. So again, I'm coming through this stitch that I just came out of on the last one and then back through the next one, so that the seaming yarn never goes over the top of the stitches on this side. And again, this is totally optional. This is just an extra detail that you can add by not stitching a whip stitch over those ribbed stitches. So this is the last stitch right here. And we are now down to the hem edge. So you can kind of see our seam right there and how we brought it down. So I'm going to go ahead and take a stitch through both corners, wrap the yarn around the needle and pull it through to make a knot. So that is our side seam. Here is what this side of our cardigan looks like at this point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side of the cardigan and weave in all of my yarn tails, and then we'll be ready to move on to this crocheted neck edging that we're going to work around both fronts and around the back neck. Alright, so my cardigan is finished as far as the assembly goes, and now we're ready to work this neck edging. And we're going to be starting on one side, going up around the back of the neck and then back down. And then we're going to work back and forth in rows to make that edging wider, which will widen both fronts of the cardigan. And that will also make a little bit of a collar or kind of neck edging that will fold back all the way around this edge. So I've got my working yarn here, and now we're going to join new yarn on our edging. So we're going to find the left front when it's worn. So if this were to be worn, then this side would be the left front, and we're going to join the yarn on the wrong side of the left front. So down here at this bottom corner, this is the left front when worn. I'm going to flip this over and join my yarn at the bottom corner on the wrong side of the left front. So there's my join, and now I'm going to chain 2 and work a ribbed half double crochet in the same stitch. And this right here is actually the foundation edge. So it is, it does look slightly different, but there is still a diagonal strand right below the top 2 strands of the stitch. So I'm going to ribbed half double crochet in the same stitch and in the next 6 stitches. So it may be just a tiny bit more tricky to grab that diagonal strand here because the diagonal strand is not as loose, but it is still available to work into even though this is the foundation half double crochet edge. Alright, so there's my last ribbed half double crochet. Of course I'm crocheting over the tail. And now for the size that I'm making, I'm going to half double crochet in the next 49 stitches. And this is where that foundation half double crochet that we used really comes in handy, because right now I'm working into the foundation edge of the second part of the front here, and it looks and feels just like working into the top of a row of stitches. So it's a whole lot easier than having to work into a foundation chain. Alright, there's that 49th stitch, and I am right here at the corner where the front and the back neck edge kind of intersect right here. So I have 1 stitch left before the corner. So now I'm going to work a double crochet 3 together. Now if you're not familiar with this stitch, it's not super difficult to work. If you can make a double crochet, then you can do this. But what we're doing is we're making 3 partial double crochets and then joining them together. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the last stitch on the front edge, which is this edge that I've been working into. Yarn over, pull up 1 loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now if we were to finish this as a double crochet, we would yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops, but we're not going to do that yet. So the second double crochet in the double crochet 3 together is going to go right here in the corner. I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook directly into that corner, yarn over, pull up 1 loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So now we have 2 partial double crochets on the hook. Then I'm going to do it again, yarn over, insert into what would be the next stitch along this back neck edge, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So now I have the original loop that was on my hook and 3 partial double crochets. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on my hook. So that is the end of our double crochet 3 together, and now we're going to work across this back neck edge. So this edge is actually the ends of the rows, and so we are just going to insert the hook wherever it looks like the next stitch should go as far as the spacing between stitches. Sometimes they are a little bit tight, not too tight. You just gotta wiggle your hook in there and get 2 strands. I don't recommend working into a single strand off of this edge because it will look much neater if your hook is inserted under 2 strands. So we're gonna half double crochet evenly across this back neck edge until we have room left on this edge for 1 more stitch, and then we're gonna stop. And the idea is that we just want our row of half double crochet to lay smooth and flat without any gaps and without any kind of warped sections where there's too many stitches. So one thing I like to try to go by when I'm trying to work evenly across an edge is I'll put 1 stitch in the end of 1 row for half double crochet and 2 stitches in the end of the next row. And of course you can put them separately. That one didn't quite catch on my hook. You can put the 2 stitches in the end of 1 row in 2 different spots, but just as a general rule of thumb, I like to put 1 stitch into the end of 1 row and then 2 stitches into the end of the next row, just to try to get a smooth, even, and consistent edge so that it doesn't ruffle, it doesn't warp, and it doesn't have gaps. Alright, so I have one stitch left before that corner, and now I'm going to work another double crochet 3 together. So there's room for one stitch right here before this corner. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into that one stitch left before the corner, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one loop, and then I'm going to stop. Now I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into that corner space, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and stop. So we've got 2 partial double crochets now. And now we're going to begin working across this other front edge here. So I'm going to yarn over, insert in the first stitch on the front edge, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. I've got 3 partial double crochets on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. So now we are to the other front edge on the other side, and I'm going to half double crochet in the next 49 stitches on this edge. Alright, there's that 49th stitch, and now I'm going to work a ribbed half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So that is the end of row 1 of the edging, and if I kind of lay this back out, you can see where that we've worked starting at this edge, we've worked all the way up around the back of the neck and then back down this front. So now we're ready to move on to row 2. Alright, for row 2 we are going to chain 2 and turn the work, and we're going to ribbed half double crochet in the same stitch and in the next 6 stitches. And now what we're going to do is we're going to half double crochet across this front neck edge until we get to 1 stitch before the double crochet 3 together from the previous row. Alright, so I have 1 stitch left before the double crochet 3 together from the previous row, and you can see that this right here is the top of that double crochet 3 together. So now I'm going to double crochet 3 together in the stitch right before the double crochet 3 together from the previous row, in the double crochet 3 together from the previous row, and the stitch after. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now I'm going to yarn over, insert into that double crochet 3 together, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now I'm going to yarn over, insert into the next stitch afterwards, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now I've got 3 partial double crochets on the hook, yarn over, pull through all the loops on the hook. So now I'm going to half double crochet across this back neck edge until I have 1 stitch remaining before the double crochet 3 together from the previous row in the other corner. Alright, so I've got 1 stitch left before that double crochet 3 together, and I'm going to work a double crochet 3 together right here so that the second double crochet or partial double crochet is in the center on top of the double crochet 3 together from the previous row. So now I'm just going to half double crochet all the way down this front edge until 7 stitches remain. Alright, I've got 7 stitches left, and now I'm going to ribbed half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. And there we go, that's the end of row 2. So let me just lay this out again so you can see kind of where we're at. And we have added 2 rows of edging around this neck edge so far. So for the size that I'm making, I'm going to repeat row 2 more times, and then we'll move on to row 3. So I finished repeating row 2, and now we're ready to move on to row 3, which is the last row. And for row 3, we are just going to chain 2 and turn, and half double crochet in each stitch across. All the way across. Now we're making the part of the edging that folds back. So this row does not have any double crochet 3 togethers, it doesn't have any ribbing stitches, it's all just plain half double crochet. So I'm just going to half double crochet in each stitch all the way across till I get back down to the other end of the row. Alright, and here we are at the end of the row. So that is the end of row 3. And for the size that I'm making, I'm going to repeat row 3 6 more times to finish out the neck edging. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that neck edging, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we're finished. Alright, so I've finished repeating those rows for the neck edging, and now my cardigan is basically finished, so I can cut the yarn, tie off, and weave in my yarn tail, and then my cardigan is finished. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you make this project, let me know how it turns out for you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.